so much for joining us. It's been a while since we did a live. Today's is a really interesting topic on histamine. So, histamine intolerance isn't just about sneezing after wine or feeling flushed when you eat sushi. It's a complex chemical puzzle that can show up as headaches, bloating, anxiety, and even itchy skin. The presence of histamine intolerance often rears its head without an obvious pattern. Our body actually need histamine. Histamine plays an integral part in the immune system, digestive process, and even how our brain communicates. But when your system can't break it down efficiently, that useful messenger turns into a troublemaker. The symptom can mimic food sensitivities, skin problems, or stress, among many other symptoms. And that's why we're so glad to chat on IG Live today with Heather Oricchio, a histamine intolerance coach. During this live, we're going to discuss root cause of histamine intolerance, why increasing supplement intake might not be the answer, how to get good sleep, and so much more. Hello, hi Heather.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I think you were joining and I was like trying to send you an invite at the same time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I I only do lives every so often, so I'm always like, I forget how to do this.
It's all like super smooth. I've had like a worse experience with
Aw.
live.
Yes, me too.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became a histamine intolerance coach.
Yeah. So it wasn't intentional. My goal was just to be a coach that got people healthier and focused on women's hormones and gut health. And things just kind of gradually evolved. So I would occasionally post about histamine intolerance on my social media 5, 6 years ago. And I noticed there was a big response every time I posted about that. And it was like, getting messages and comments like, "Oh my god, this is the biggest aha moment. No one's ever put these, symptoms together and been able to tell me exactly what's going on." So, I just kind of, I was like, "Wow, there's a really big need here, and I actually understand this from going through it myself." And then, started to work with clients and all of that. So, it was a kind of a gradual thing over time. So I mean, I'm really passionate about it. I'm really grateful that it worked out this way because unfortunately, histamine intolerance, mast cell activation really has exploded over the past couple of years. But at the same time, it's also something that I feel like quietly brews in someone's life. And when I'm having a conversation, mostly with women, I do work with men, but we know that this affects women predominantly. They're like, yeah, now I understand that I was having histamine symptoms at a very young age. I just wasn't able to recognize that.
Mhm.
And it was the same for myself. I was getting migraines and PMS and PMDD, and nobody ever was like, it's histamine.
Mhm.
So,
Because it's like it's also feels really benign because our body needs it, and then like the
Mhm.
symptoms like so similar to everything else.
Yes.
So it's so hard to recognize. So then in your word, like what is histamine intolerance?
Yeah, so histamine intolerance is basically like a way of describing when somebody has a problem metabolizing histamine, so that's predominantly the liver, the gut also plays a big role, and or their body is making too much histamine. So there's usually both of those things that are happening, and so now histamine levels become really high. And depending on the person's genetics is essentially going to dictate more so where they're going to feel it in their body. So for some people, it's the brain, other people, it's the lungs, other people, it's the GI tract. For some, it's a little bit of two or three or more when we get into more mast cell activation. But yeah, that's basically what you'll see.
And you mentioned like it's getting more and more common. Like how common are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, statistic wise, I know, thinking about mast cell activation specifically, it did not it wasn't a credible diagnosis until 2016. That's when doctors actually put it in their little diagnosis book. And so, they were right now, I think they estimate maybe 18% of the
Oh, wow.
population. But I imagine it's really much greater than that.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
That's a lot. Like
It is
That's a
for
lot.
sure. Yeah, I mean, and of course I'm biased, but after kind of working with so many different individuals that have intolerance and don't, you can really start to put the pieces together and
Mhm.
make a guess as to, sure, these other things are going on, but I wouldn't be surprised if histamine was underlying this as well.
Mhm. In a very powerful post, you mentioned your root causes of histamine intolerance, which we're gonna dive in a little bit later. However,
Mhm.
like, is it common for such wide range of triggers that causing histamine intolerance?
Yeah, yeah. So when I'm working with an individual, I want to hear about what your childhood was like, what was mom's house like, were you breastfed? Do you think you ever lived in a moldy place or did you go to school in a moldy place? What's your antibiotic history? Have you been on birth control? What's your vaccination history? So all of
Mhm.
that is essentially filling up the bucket over the years. And then there's usually a big catalyst that just tips the scale. Oftentimes it's mold, sometimes it's just a prolonged period of trauma, sometimes it's they did some exotic traveling, they came back, their gut was never the same.
Mhm.
So it's different for everybody, but a lot of times those are like the big catalysts that I tend to see.
So, what are some early signs of histamine intolerance?
Yeah, so early signs could be like migraines or headaches, sensitivity to chemicals, um, PMS or PMDD, or even just like a runny nose or acid reflux that
Mm.
happens after eating because of how the histamine can hit the GI tract. And then even like insomnia or anxiety that just suddenly comes on and you cannot explain why. Oftentimes it's more so at night because our histamine bucket is just filling up all day
Mhm.
long and then it really spills over in the nighttime. And so I know that was something I used to experience. I'd be laying on my couch at night watching Friends and I'm like, just felt like this wave of anxiety coming over my body. And I was like, I have no idea why I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin right now. And so, I had a whole bunch of stuff in mold and parasites and
Mhm.
heavy metals. And I was living right outside New York City. So there were tons of cell phone towers everywhere. And so, yeah, I mean, typically, though, it's not going to be all of those, but it's going to
Mhm.
be maybe a few of those that are quietly brewing. And they're like, well, yeah, I've struggled with that for like 10 years, but that's not a big deal. And then the other one that kind of quietly creeps in there is bile flow issues. So issues with breaking down fats and like
Mhm.
phantom gallbladder attacks. I see that, and that's what happened with myself. I see this happening with tons of women where they've had issues with breaking down fats and getting gallbladder attacks, and they, are told it's fine, or some of them get their gallbladder out. And it's, thinking about they were probably exposed to mold. Bile is so important for helping to get rid of those mold and mycotoxins, but
Mhm.
also lots of other fat soluble toxins. And then you
Mhm.
have, the estrogen issues that come with that. So that's another really big, sneaky one that I see. And then when we get the support on board for clients, that is such a game changer.
Wow. It's so
Mhm.
complicated. I'm just like hearing it, I could feel like other people are feeling like, oh my God, this is like overwhelming. There's like so much going on.
There is, but the fun thing is when I get to look at somebody's labs and it's like, okay, we have your hormones, we have your toxicity test, we have your stool test, we have your gut test, blood work. And I'm like, here's how it all pieces together. And, that's the most fun conversation we get to have because it's very validating. And they're always like, I knew something was wrong and my doctor was only running blood work and we couldn't see the full picture with that. So, yeah, it's definitely, I'm sure from like the client perspective or somebody who's really new to this,
Mhm.
it's like, how does this work?
Yeah.
But once you start, like, you typically see the very similar patterns over and over again. You have to address it according to the client's needs, but it's often a very similar cascading
Mhm.
effect.
Okay, this like is a perfect lead to my next question
Mhm.
because uh you say like stop tracing triggers and then start
Mhm.
addressing root causes. And I felt like you are giving this advice because that's exactly how you practice because you're trying to find root causes through like testing and then like piecing the puzzle together. Is that true?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, I can't fault anyone for struggling with this because you go to your conventional doctor, they want to run allergy testing. blood work. And it's like, well, we don't really see allergies, but why don't you try taking allergy medication anyway
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
antihistamines anyway? So then you kind of come from that paradigm and it's not, you haven't heard anything about stool test or mole testing or Dutch testing for your hormones. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I completely understand that.
I don't think taking like antihistamine could actually potentially make the problem worse, right? Like you already like at such high level, you press it, and then I feel like the body we're just gonna outsmart it to get even higher.
Right. Yeah. Because, I when it comes to antihistamines, most of them, what they're doing is they're blocking your cells from being able to take the histamine into the cell. So then you're still getting high histamine in your blood. So it's like it's there, it's ready, it's waiting. So if you don't take that
Oh my god.
antihistamine, sure, you can have an overflow of symptoms. I do have a fair amount of clients that are taking various types of antihistamines, and I'm like, one client described it as it's my bridge. And I'm like, that's a great way of thinking at it because it can be a bridge as long as you work on the root causes after that.
Mhm.
But, where people get stuck is they think that's the end all be all.
And then when it comes to root causes, you previously you mentioned mold. What role does mold play in histamine intolerance?
It's massive. So it's really probably the number one cause that I see with clients. And then after that is gut. And sometimes it's reversed. It's primarily gut issues. But the way that mold and mycotoxins can unfortunately impact so many organs of the body, depending on the mycotoxin, it can impact your brain and cause brain fog or neurological symptoms. Obviously, the lungs and the respiratory system, the GI tract, because your body's just producing tons of fungus.
Mhm.
You can definitely impact the kidney and liver because the body, those are the detox pathways that are taking care
Mhm.
of it. It's like kidney, liver, bile. And then, especially with women, it can impact the bladder and cause like
Mm.
phantom UTI like symptoms, but it's really the body is dumping mycotoxins. So, that's the primary reason, but then it's also, it's irritating those mast cells, and the mast cells, they release different chemical mediators, and histamine is one of hundreds of them. But the body innately knows that this mold and mycotoxin is really bad. And for those individuals that aren't good detoxers or are still getting exposed, the levels are going to build up in their body and they just won't be able to get rid of it. So it's like a constant trigger on our mast cells to release histamine. So yeah, mold is by far one of the top triggers. And then, parasites, heavy metals, environmental toxins,
Mhm.
plastics and phthalates and pesticides and BPA and all of that. And then prolonged periods of stress. So a lot of times that is the ultimate catalyst because
Mhm.
somebody's bucket's like 80% full, but then they go through that prolonged period of stress and then there's just a massive trigger. And then some other things, definitely like antibiotics and vaccines and dental
Mm.
infections, viral triggers. Whether that's COVID, whether that's just like EBV that's become reactivated,
Mhm.
those types of things.
What about low sodium levels?
Yeah, for sure. So, that we're kind of dabbling into the POTS conversation,
Mhm.
postural orthotic or static tachycardia syndrome. But yeah, we need that sodium to help stabilize our cell membranes and to, obviously keep us hydrated and regulate the cells and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, with everybody, I recommend electrolytes. I have a hard time finding good electrolytes that I like. So I'm just like, get good quality sea salt, salt your water, salt your food. We'll monitor your sodium levels via blood. We'll monitor via HTMA or maybe a deep dive with like a Nutrival or something like that. But yeah, that's minerals in general definitely play a role.
Mm. Anything else that we should keep an eye for?
Yeah, so I like monitoring thyroid function, and
Mm.
then with that, of course, a full panel. If they're struggling with chronic thyroid issues, then I'll check an EBV panel. And then if there's anything wrong with the thyroid, I'm always checking an iron panel as well with
Mm.
ferritin because there's such a big relationship with iron dysregulation and histamine intolerance. When histamine goes up, it will upregulate something called hepcidin, which essentially will bind onto your ferritin. And ferritin is the storage form of iron, so iron can get
Mhm.
into the cells. So, I can see chronically low ferritin with clients, and they're like, I take iron and I don't know why it's going up. And, I'm like, okay, it's probably because your histamine's so high, but it's also because of what's happening in your gut. You were on PPIs, you're not absorbing the iron from your food. So, yeah, iron panel, copper, zinc, ceruloplasmin, homocysteine, and the genetic piece of it. Sometimes clients already have genetics done, and sometimes I will recommend it. What I more so use the genetics for is it tells me what not to do. So, the
Mhm.
one thing that I could really caution people against is, okay, say you get your genetic report and you're freaking out because you're like, oh my God, I have so many SNPs. Well, I have news for you. Everybody has so many SNPs. Like, that's just how it is. But for most people, you can think of a time where you were fine. You didn't have symptoms. You were
Mhm.
functioning totally normal, probably not even eating that great or sleeping that well. So we know when your bucket is empty, those SNPs aren't a problem for you.
Mhm.
So, the genetic information, I think, if anything, is more validating for individuals because they can see why they have a tendency to be more anxious.
Yeah.
Oh, I have lots of SNPs with metabolizing my dopamine or my serotonin. Oh, yeah, I do have the SNP for DAO. My body doesn't break down histamine really well. But the thing is it's not fixed and it is
Mhm.
fluctuating all the time. So I don't want people to get too hung up on that. I think if anything, it's more validating. But
Yeah.
what not to do, don't look at your report and say, oh, it tells me I need to take all of these Bs and tyrosine and, you know, all of this stuff. Because what you're going to do is you're going to trigger a detox response because that's
Mhm.
all like rocket fuel for your liver. So now you're going to be dumping histamine and toxins really quickly.
Okay, now when it comes to dealing with it, since
Mhm.
we talk about all the issues surrounding it, when dealing with it, like what is the low histamine diet and like how long should you try it before, moving on to a more in-depth search for the root cause and then, and then also working with more like professional, somebody who actually knows what they're doing, like you.
Right. So everybody should try a low histamine diet for at least 3 weeks. For the most part, people will see an improvement if it's going to help in that timeline. And so that's cutting out, fermented foods and deli meats and cheeses. There are unfortunately like spinach, tomato,
Mhm.
strawberries, like some healthy foods that could also be triggering bananas, avocados. And then there are some like liberators that sometimes people can get away with, but I would for sure cut out the real high histamine foods for 3 weeks and see how you
Mhm.
feel. If you feel even 20% better, I'm going to encourage you to stick with that
Mhm.
because it's just bring your inflammation down, and then
Yeah.
we'll be able to get you a little bit more stabilized. So when we start progressing you to detox, we're going to know, okay, are you having a negative response to the detox? Or I'm not sure. I think I'm still reacting to food.
Mhm. And then what about supplementation and also sleep?
Yeah. So sleep is, of course, critical. I mean, you're not going to fix anything if you're not regulating
Yeah.
your sleep. And so that's a difficult conversation I've had with night workers. I've worked with a couple night workers, and I'm like, I'm
Mhm.
totally down to give this a try. But if after a couple months you're doing everything else right, I'm going to think it's that.
Yeah.
On the other side, I have worked with a couple individuals who I just think their circadian rhythm is a little bit different. So people who are like,
Mhm.
I sleep better from 12 to 8. There is a sleep researcher, I can't remember his name, but he's like, there are people that are just genetically built different and they do better with like a 12 to 8 or some variation from the typical like 9, 10 to
Mhm.
6, 7. Um, so, just kind of understanding that about yourself, I think will help. But yeah, optimizing sleep, because that's when a lot of individuals get histamine dumping. So
Mhm.
in the beginning, that might mean taking some kind of a mast cell stabilizer, a prescription one, if the typical herbal supplements aren't helpful for you. So quercetin gets the biggest promotion as far as being the strongest herbal mast cell stabilizer. It definitely is.
Mm.
But individuals who really struggle with PMS or PMDD, that's likely an issue for you because there's probably an issue with your phase 2 liver detox clearing out that
Mhm.
estrogen. And so it'll slow that down. It'll slow down the COMT SNP. So I'm always cautious and I never recommend quercetin until I see someone's Dutch test. But there are lots of other ones, like skullcap is a favorite of mine, luteolin, rutin. Um, there's a lot. I have like a mast cell stabilizer cheat sheet list if anybody is interested. So yeah, that's definitely the place to start. Lots of people do well with DAO, so I would get that in 3 times a day, whether or not you think you need it or not, because it's just going to help your body metabolize things better.
Mhm.
And then I do talk about EMFs. So you don't have to go crazy, but what I do recommend is getting a meter and at least check your bedroom and
Mhm.
especially around your bed because, we don't, for the most part, a lot of people don't feel EMFs. Some people are EMF
Mhm.
sensitive. But it's a very real exposure that's constantly triggering your mitochondria to be under stress and it's keeping your body in the cell danger response, which is like mast cell activation essentially. So the EMF's important, and then making sure you're not sleeping on a toxic mattress or with a toxic
Mhm.
pillow. Luckily, so many companies are becoming aware of this, so there's easy ones to find for your budget. But those are some of the top areas that I'll look at for sleep. And then the other thing is, well, what's happening with your blood sugar and your cortisol? Because that's
Mhm.
almost always an issue. And so there's different interventions kind of depending on what we're seeing with that. But I'm frequently recommending a continuous glucose monitor or just
Mhm.
manually monitoring because you can't, that's so foundational. It's just as foundational as sleep. If you're not balancing your blood sugar, you're not going to make any progress.
Oh my goodness, there's so much. Okay. How can someone work with you? Because I also feel like, yes, there are like supplements out there. People can also do continuous glucose monitor. They could do elimination diet, like a start with a low histamine diet. But there's like so much going on, like
Mhm.
without an actual like someone to kind of walk you through this or understanding your symptoms and then your past. It's like really really hard. I mean, like I don't know too much on this topic, but I'm already getting overwhelmed. I'm like, where do I even start? So,
Yeah.
how can someone work with you?
Yeah. Well, I, see clients one to one. So if anyone's interested in that, that's available. It's a 6-month program. Or I also offer a one-time lab review. So if you already have all the labs, or if you need us to order the labs, we can do that. And then we go over everything in a 90-minute call. And I really map things out in a very sensitive manner because I'm used to working with individuals who are so sensitive.
Mhm.
But exactly what you're saying, lots of people, because there is such great information out there, but there's
Mhm.
too much information.
It's too
And
much
so,
information. Exactly.
yeah, you don't know what's relevant to you. And then especially if you don't know your root causes, you're not going to know how to address it properly. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I remember struggling on my own and, my husband was like, you haven't figured this out," over 10 years ago, "You're not figuring this out, like, you have to go see someone." So I went to, like, a well-respected naturopath in Encinitas, and he unfortunately gave me a protocol that made me hurt really bad. And so after that, I was like, "I have to figure this out on my own." So I was my own guinea pig, but there was a lot of suffering along the
Yeah.
way. So, I totally understand if somebody doesn't feel like it's the right time to work together. But for sure, if you feel like you've been suffering for months, or if it's just the overwhelm of information, like having
Mhm.
somebody to tell you, no, that's not what you should do. This is exactly what you need to do on this type of timeline. Like the peace that you can just feel with that, I feel like is worth it.
Yeah. We're like really into testing because that gives you very objective data. But you meant even just during this live, you already mentioned so many tests, right?
Hmm.
But I even think like people should start with, okay, what's the proper test I should be getting?
Hmm.
Working with a professional, figure that out, and then like considering your symptoms, your timeline, and then actually have a plan versus like since people can already learn so much from your experience, like why would you want to like put yourself through this versus like just feel better like sooner rather than later.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, a big red flag is if you're working with a practitioner and they've only run blood work or they've only done like maybe blood work and HTMA, like you have to
Mhm.
see what's happening with your gut. Definitely mold is a absolute guarantee. The heavy metals and environmental toxins not as critical, but when I run it, I always see a lot of stuff on those as well. So I just kind of assume those are also part of your bucket. But yeah, gut test, Dutch test, and mold test are like the absolute minimum.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. Like anything else you'd like to share?
Just, not to feel discouraged. A lot of people that I work with, I'm not their first practitioner or their second or their third. And just to make sure that whoever you're working with is really listening and is really tuning into your symptoms. Because, yes, we've talked about the tests. The tests are important, but sometimes there's information that the test can't tell
Yeah.
us. And that's for your practitioner to be listening to you, seeing how you're responding, how you're not responding, and then being able to pivot. So, if you
Mhm.
feel like, you're not being heard, or maybe they just don't understand all the intricacies of histamine intolerance, then, be your own best advocate and shop around and just find someone who you feel like is a better fit.
Absolutely. So I guess I have a one last question. Sorry. Like,
Yeah.
how do people reach you? And how do they
Yeah.
sign up for the program?
Yeah, definitely. So, they can either like shoot us a DM, they can comment ready on any post, or of course, my website is revivewithheather.com. And then there's a section that says how to work with me. So they can see all the various program options. I also have my course, it's a 12 module course. And it really walks them through exactly how to address everything, the diet piece, talking about the genetics, talking about mold and gut health and hormones, how to maintain your success. So, I've had some great feedback on that from, just regular individuals to other practitioners who are like, I'm going to use this within my practice.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
I love it.
um,
Thank you so much for sharing. I think we're gonna have to bring you back on again to talk about other topics or just like like small subtopics of this. It's like it's absolutely fascinating.
yeah, I unfortunately could talk all day because there's so many different directions that you can take this. So, yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Have
of
a good day.
course. You too. Bye.
Bye.